So when you think about the the cannon fodder of sidearm politics and referring that to the insignificance that the insignificant life, or you weigh that up against the seismographic and the significance of the Australian nation, you want to, for starters, sort of, isolate the theory that, like intellectual property or having to fake the funk and freak within you, this goes back quite some time, and it's not until you actually sort of look closer to home do you understand that that's where most of the accidents in this world occur. It's like that with traffic, and it's like that with possession, be it 9/10 of the law. As if to say, it's one thing that people live a certain way and you couldn't mistake their integrity as a people, but like the integral systems and the systems systematic relay, like the ability in which to sort of, converge rather than identify, let's say, a few sheets in the wind, unable to stop the paperwork that just falls from underneath you because from one contract signed brings about a duplicate copy with similar little, derived APBs to it, or derived bullet points that is like forged contractual rights, and over time it mounts itself, and that's how people fall victim to corporate tactics. One signature in opposed to another, building paperwork that just sort of basically dissolves the elements. The cries of New Zealand is enough of a reminder that way back, you think Australia don't do it. If people remember like you do it to New Zealand, then all of a sudden it puts Australia back into the spotlight. Because let's just say, without getting technical here of all history, let's get a few points. For example, before there was the war, New Zealanders, for example, if they came to this country, there was no such thing as Centrelink or social security welfare in play. For the first 2 years, they were forced to get a job, as if to come into the country the right way meant that all New Zealanders and Polynesians and people from afar had to work or look for a way to support themselves for 2 years. So even if you were suspended on a pension, to have your pension only suspended for 2 years, meant that if you actually got on Centrelink, if you're on it right now, to have your pension suspended means that it's still in play, so that if you if you ended up losing a job or something, the best form of welfare, supposedly, that you would automatically go back on a pension or something. Automatically. New Zealanders and people like that never had the luxury of automatically being, authorised to be on social security. How often did New Zealand become the kickstand or the practice kickstand in all of this, just like Australians themselves, or how the system breaks down over time? See, Australia lives by a means, just like the British Empire, say like an industrial tradespeople, they're industrial, their trade, their commerce, they live a modest life. They don't really earn as much as you might like to believe, and because of that, there was always conservatism, doing the best with what you got. It's like that with the 1970s and 80s, where people use nappies, actual reputable pieces of cloth in which to put on their children's bottom, bobby pins, pilchers, even shorts and things like that. There's never a thing called emergency nappies or, waste disposal nappies for babies. Now these days, every fucking nappy, for starters, before we can isolate and identify 50 products, right, for people, is an emergency. It's a chemical trail of being tricked into it. Whereas you don't ever have to spend money on nappies ever again, especially an emergency one, if you find the age-old nappies, bobby pins, pilchers, and put them through the washing machine like you do your own shitty clothes, and then until the time comes to replace those cloths, replace the cloths. Now, there's a duration of about 2 years that really goes with cloths or clothes anyway, in some cases, before you're going to change them. So that's where Australia had like nations, people, you say rich empires from whence they're established, had to go through ghastly, costly wars and overlook their agonizing loss from a people's perspective before they had to pick themselves up and start all over again. Now all of a sudden the ideology's got in the way of people to make them think they got to buy nappies and that they got to use chemicals for everything, smack everything with chemicals, that everything they see and share with each other is a scary thing and that you should avoid it. Distance spectrum assessment deficit disorder, to an effect that brings people so far distant, so readily accessible and close to you, and people that are actually in your immediate space are being pushed away. It's like that with social media, but it's like that even with your workplace, and it's like that with your greater priorities and commitments in a scheduled life, as if to bring the word itinerary to a brink point of where you say itinerant. So you have an itinerant shortfall in decision-making capabilities that see it impede upon your will and your greater majesty and sanctimony, just like the basic economic factors at play. Now, back to the New Zealand factor in a world like this. Again, for a second point, quickly before that actually, we've got the lifestyles exceeding income and income exceeding lifestyles factor. That like just earning a modest wage or living a certain way, some countries have been exhibiting a gap between the rich and the poor or wealthy over the, so many fed to so many few. People experiencing a great life in opposed to others, but let's just say the way of life is great. Yeah? Well, like departmental privilege or diplomatic pardon and privilege, what is it to have a diplomatic pardon or privilege in the nation of Australia with 300 nationalities these days? Before it was something like 199 nations that Australia represents. Well, for so long, people in a departmental life, before the law was compromised, the concrete law or lawful abode to democratic right, legislation compromises the law and reaches out to too many people. It becomes a one-size-fits-all legislation policy, which actually covers people, like the politics, like the departments, like the privileged, right, in which to hide behind the masses because they can't control the numbers. They can't even control themselves. So they hide behind the masses like people smugglers do on a boat. For every 1,000 people on the boat, the people smuggler is actually on the boat because he's trying to get back or he's trying to make it into the land, or something. Australia has a standover tactic forever, used just like the departments, and slaving people to those causes. Now, they've done it to New Zealand, and before you know it, just like the nappies and whatever, a war erupts in the world, ipso facto erupts in the heavens, and Australia is forced to live beyond its means, just like the nappies instead of the pilchers and the bobby pins, right, to use an ideological approach, radical in all of its consultancies and its selling point, even in politics and ticking a box to approve it, and be in a mad rush to live with it and not without it, and compensate for something else like consolidation tactics. And now all of a sudden they're under the closeful, watchful eye of the United Nations conventions. They're under the closeful, watchful eye of the conventions of the United Nations. So all of a sudden people are getting free welfare or free social security, when this was never the way for Australia, because of the way in which you ask people to come in the right way, the wrong way. Australia was living well beyond its means, trying to play cover and defence in a play which completely lives beyond its means. And so therefore there becomes a possessiveness, a slave possession factor and slave exploitations. They're doing it to people that have worked for 40 years plus and paid tax to the government and worked their arse off for 40 years plus and can't even be seen with a reputable supplement from a welfare agency. Even apply for a simple healthcare card without understanding everything about them, just to be able to get access to healthcare benefits through a concession even on a limited fortnightly or weekly pay from their employer that sees them entitled to something just like that. Because Australia is hiding behind the fact that they have been living a lifestyle exceeding income and income exceeding lifestyles. Slave possession, slave exploitation, standover tactics, Ponzi schemes, punts rackets, and kicking their own national sons and daughters in the guts and kicking them even harder when they're down. Loss of wages, intellectual property theft, who it actually reaches before it actually only becomes like a constant, dying in the arse theory, or few sheets in the wind from the moment it was written. There was no power to stop the paperwork from circulating into the system, where not even the courts understand through adjudication or through benchmark protocol or capabilities what they're actually servicing, because supposedly it all rests on the prosecutors to actually process it. The discretion doesn't even really come into it if it means you don't have the capacity in which to stop it going through the prosecution's office. Any form of paperwork, or has you use people like cartilages or ligaments or tissues, like a stem cell operation, sort of a watchful eye of surveillance that sees you fail to even process people and close the breaches in order to process them and go on to the next one. Knowing who an Australian is, what an assurance of support is, or what it is to actually nominate people diplomatic pardon, diplomatic privilege, or nominate people departmental concession or departmental protection. Australia is about an individual merits-based systems, and it always has. That's what it is to go to school and receive your individual merits-based life, where second refers to being a family or seeking a family, but your work is most important. Best form of welfare is a job. But what is it when people thieve your work and they don't even fucking provide work as an alternative and are found not making anything work? This is Australia falling victim to the cannon fodder of sidearm politics, now having been seen under the closeful, watchful eye of the UN conventions, because Australia has been using each other like shields in hospitals and in residential homes. And they'll tell everybody they're on a security factor. But there's not supposed to be any sort of departmental concession or protection in place, even for people in social media or in surveillance hubs or intelligence agencies. If you simply don't know what you're processing, it's obviously a lifestyle exceeding an income and an income exceeding lifestyle, which is not even a reputable concentration camp. It would be poorer than the concentration camps before they erupt in World War II. It would be poorer than even the dictatorial or the dictatorship of the Romanians, even in the 70s, 1970s and 80s. It's absolutely that impoverished that nobody understands the platform or the foundation in which everything's been built upon. It's been built upon by paperwork and collage tactics like copy and paste, gluing paper, or plastic money or plastic photographs, to the point where you don't even know how to conserve, even through pragmatic politics or pragmatic conservatism. It's the only way to go. But like conserve 100% the best with what you got, you people are literally driving embezzlement into people's heads like a forged conversation or a forged industry, forged documentation and forged relationships. And there's nothing really authentic and brutally frank or honest frank about forged lifestyles in any signature. And any way which sees you hide behind people like shields or use them like shields in residential homes, in the hospitals, the records, even at the watchtower command of the government's posterity measures for children, for people abroad, and as they welcome everybody from overseas to take advantage of wealth, even if we're being, conquered by a form of politics or conquered by another country, right? There's still the active use of being able to do the best with what you got. But it's like everybody has, in fact, failed the wealth of Australia. Your enemies or your conquerors have failed the wealth of Australia. Because you just want the wealth, you don't want to retain the wealth or sustain it. It's one thing to process or fail to get the processes right, but this is a world dominated by concession, and it should never be. You say, well, social security concession? No, departmental concession and departmental protectionism, which is where we get the protection rackets going on at a last minute ditch effort of people to claim chronological history as your very own. You should have just dug your own grave and been the heroes to leave the legacy. Because at the end of the day, believe me, it's all nanny state. It is so nanny state politics in Australia, they become nanny state gangsters, nanny state government, nanny state friends and family. They're nannied out by their 20-something. You're just too damn privileged when you shouldn't have to be. It creates the wrong kind of bipedal human being and the wrong kind of construct. Either it's in your bones or it's not. You're just a fleshly people that impersonate character and impersonate the high moral grounds in a subliminal head-nodding affair at political roundtables or legislative roundtables. And it does start with the family home, just like it ends up at the legislative roundtable. You can't just be nodding your head in subliminal warfare, only to sort of continue to increase subliminal warfare. At what stage do people inflicting the psychological warfare or the subliminal warfare know how to consecrate it? They end up going over the cliff. They'll tell people it's like, making insanity, trying to make insane crazy out of your mistakes and the results at the same time. That it was all part of that way. No, this is people impersonating their character, impersonating their worth. There are a lot of people that are deserving of their wage and their negotiations. A lot of people are heroes and they're suffering. But at the same time, this shouldn't have to be a story. At the end of the day, it relates to the moral agency in which to build the consecrated, holistic, reserved, special use of despotism and conquering all of your affairs. If you are forever using shields because the whole world decided to watch you, then what is that? If by the time the world watched you and war kicked in and you're living beyond your means and average, all you've got to do is find surveillance hubs and departments watching people like sardines in a can in their home, or even the actual space in any department or agency, right? And you will find people in a desperate attempt to claim chronological history as their own, like Ponzi scheme operators or protection rackets or punce rackets. And what are punces? Just like pimps, they're modern day drug dealers and sales marketing companies that rip it off and then send the audio, without the audio, the vision to another country. And this is like occupying advertising space they're not paying for. Political gay lobbyist groups, a distant spectrum disorder of people compounded away from society against reality with no active assessment capabilities whatsoever, because they're forever avoiding prosecution with why they continue to gain access to people's lives or continue to be funded that way. It's just fundamentalism at its worst, because like fundamentalists, they are a very small percentage of people on the planet, in opposed to box separatism, which you find in Hollywood, you find in these, oh, look how great we are, but you know that they're fucking whores, you know that they're fucking drug dealing fucking murderers, big fucking mouth, blah, 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 looking for somebody's brother or sister. When you're not a family, the only thing that actually fights it and lives on in the whole wide world like this is called congressional freedom. And what do you think congressional freedom is? It's not the existent rule. It's the coalition of the willing, of where you find congressional fortitude. Without it, people are going upon their merry way and fail to even prosecute their own internal departmental features. Even when all the prosecution is rest on the prosecutors. All of the goddamn case rests on the prosecutor. Probable cause, probable cause, probable cause, but due process. Even the right to face your accusers and cross-examine them before, during and after any $1 or one bit of energy or one approval or one authorization goes ahead. Just like the classic case of treat New Zealand like fucking Israel and Egypt way back in the day of Moses. Or until you understand what is it to be stood over by these cheeky fucking smart ass people with their home videos and their fucking memes that have just denigrated New Zealand forever, until people pick up on the fact, why aren't New Zealand proud of their achievements? Because of the fucking cheeky thieving bitch next door. Before they take over all the fucking military years before, having AR-15s dumped in New Zealand for fucking crazy individuals to pick it up and murder people in cold blood like that. As if it's not all designed that way. Probably not. But where you find integrity, you are bound to find corruption. Just like possession be 9/10 of the law, most accidents happen closer to home, just given the traffic laws. You're using people like a fucking practice kickstand, like you use in New Zealand like a practice kickstand, but never would you be found doing that to people in a convention at the United Nations. Oh no, it's all right. All of a sudden they would give them everything you got for free. And it was never your way because like the empire, you could never survive the fucking wars unless you lived by your means. Not because the overseas were pushing up on you and standing over. No, you gave in because you were trying to imitate your life and imitate your laws. Imitate what you were doing, like you were forever possessing people like slaves and exploiting them. That's where Australia had been getting their incremental wealth from, bit by bit, until the hearts of the people waxed gross, and seeing a gap between the rich and the poor is what we call tearaway suspects in areas that actually sell photography and sell movies and music, or sell or get rich off people's pain. Pleasure off people's pain, or treasure off other people's trash, or, weaponizing poison from other people's truth. The same truth that brings people to the brink of annihilation in those congressional fieldworks of recognition that saw Australia, or people on average, have no accreditation or qualification, because how could they mention your yearbook of when you finished at school in the 80s or the 90s, only to be a 30, 40, 50-something-year-old now, with no qualifications or schooling to fall back on to forge your wealth and your greater qualification and input to that service requirement and retention at the UN. In a world like this that seeks leadership and the quality of leadership, albeit the moral character in which to build the agency, be it the moral high grounds in which to build character through agency. It simply isn't there. It's shielded and exploiting people because yous are actually scared of being exposed. Australia is like right up there with the worst of the worst in the world that are always frantic and panicking about being exposed. Every time something happens in Australia, the security agencies rip it off YouTube and they rip it off Google so that you never find it. You never did it. This isn't a conjugation or protecting the subjugation of nations in the world. At the end of the day, we're talking about the characteristics of the people now, not 20 years ago or 25 years ago. Your children now, grown up, they don't know how to face prosecution. The cowards outweigh the Congression, and it's because you didn't do it. Supposedly it's just a story. However, having said that, because that's the fact, you haven't basically consecrated your means and your average. Therefore, you are being serviced and retained like unqualified people, even in the professional ranks, at the helm of all justice and cognitive skills, precognition, cognitives. It's not there. It's actually not there. That's where you're finding the subliminal warfare. Trying to get off on a crutch charge and make people think that they deserve it, because the easiest way to cover something up is to make people think they deserve it. But like insurance fraud, unless you process and see the balancing act of the scale of justice, how can two people on one side of a telephone or one side of a lawsuit or an inquiry look so different in lob scale justice or scale of wealth and upkeep? If you can't identify it for the life of you, what is it to even see the departments look like they're wealthy or authentic or have authority when they don't even have anything to start with? They were all built on somebody else's fucking tax money. Therefore, they're trying to justify their qualified position, but they don't even have professional rank. So they fall back on their disposition and containing their file, like their job security outweighing everything. The identity in which the capacity in which to identify broken manner in any given enterprise. The enterprise that says, what do you mean job security over everything else? Because yous would be up for review or at the job office or something. You couldn't give it up if you tried, if you're under a departmental concession or a departmental protection, right? Game over. Because that's called a gimmick. Low budget adfectation through gimmick and industrialized practice that just sees you squirm and jerk your ways through file, rank, and disposition. Either you're accountable or you're not. The accountability sees you live beyond your means and average because you're not even servicing the wage negotiation through skill and attribute. War of attrition, you might say, but it's a war of attrition. Yeah, but what attributes? To talk about how you smell when all you are is a fucking arse sniffer, tailgating and whitetail hunting? To forge your documentation and forge your administration? It's all shielded. Shielded by pedanticism and nanny state. A nanny state affair. Otherwise, you shouldn't have a problem. It solves itself. Go on to the next one. The Bible says they slept in Jesus. They slept in Jesus. It's not even atheism. It's just a modern day 21st century nation in the end of time that don't even possess the ability in which to face those who they accuse. And they service the whole system in which to hide behind a veil, like an alleviated balancing act that tries to find people bumped instead of bequeathed. When they say the greatest form of welfare is a job. But what is a job in opposed to a life? It's not a department or a special agency's research counter claim against applications that were never filed and to be responsible through provisions like paying for it. You can't make a claim on anything unless you pay for it and be responsible. Otherwise, you're aborting everything and just pretend like you have access. But you wouldn't even do that to an X or an XXX. Because once you've broken up with your ex, you want nothing to do with them. Even though you've spent 10 years of your life with them, they mean nothing to you. You came to the world with nothing. You just showed up to rip them off. Everything that a person gives you at the church is that family's. Just like the ring you put on the other person's finger, if you're going to divorce, you got to give them the ring back, then go on and sort out the rest afterwards. But when a person shows up to a church, everything that a person shows up to a church to give to you is that person's. That is theirs, everything. What would your motive be? Oh, no, but I wanted no part of this. Well, I've got to take my ring back and then we can go on with it. Oh, no, but you gave me this. You gave me this. What's your motive then? You're going to take all the kisses and cuddles with you too? What is your motive? Nobody has the business of buying 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 wedding rings in their life, even if they found a 5th, 6th or 7th partner. It's none of your business. The business we all witnessed, you're required to give the ring back because they're going to keep their family like you're going to run off with, like you're going off to another family. It's none of your business to know what the ring is. It's none of your business to know what the fuck you showed up to only to rip everybody off. Trying to control the mass because you can't control the numbers. So if you can't control the numbers, what's your motive with holding the ring? A memento? I thought it was just tinfoil garbage. Probably just like the paperwork you filed in divorce because you wanted nothing to do with the world, the universe, for the rest of your life. You were just you were scatting and you were trying to claim all chronological history as your own, guilty via association, in opposed to the innocence of beauty. As simple as being able to put your finger up for people and sacrifice your life and limb and get on with your life like the processes, be it all the closing of those breaches. I thought you didn't want anything to do with it. I didn't want nothing to do with this. Okay, well, I'll just take my half of what was at the church and then you can go from there. That's between you and me. I know, but you gave me this. You gave me this. Yeah? What's your motive? Your wedding rings just become a bag of skulls that you collect every step of the way without being accountable for the fucking teenage hearts that you ripped out before you found one husband, 2 wives, 3 husbands, 4 wives in your life? Just like every contract or job that you couldn't fulfill because you were waiting for the company to release you of your contract before you could go reach another great, brilliant team. What's your motive? Under the close watchful eye of the conventions of the UN now, whereas before it was a lifestyle exceeding income and slave exploits or slave possession. Victim to the cannon fodder of sidearm politics. It all starts with snaffle techniques or snags, like fishermen. You'd make people think that you're still a fucking fisherman in the digital era with your cameras. You'd make people think you're still a fucking fisherman looking for snags. And all you want is a snag and you're trying to wriggle your way out of it even when you should just let it go. So when you think about the cannon fodder of sidearm politics and referring that to